Before sunrise on September 2, 1944, the light carrier USS San Jacinto was already awake. Deck crews moving in practice bursts, engines warming, the sea rolling like it had all the time in the world. On the flight deck, a 20-year-old Navy pilot, Lieutenant Junior George H.W. Bush, climbed into a Grumman TBM Avenger with a mission that sounded clean and simple on paper. Fly toward the Bonin Islands, hit Japanese installations on Chichi Jima, and get back to the ship. It was never simple. Bush's Avenger carried 4 500-pound bombs, and he was part of a small strike. 4 Avengers sent in against targets on and around Chichi Jima. The island wasn't big, but it was bristling with defenses. Exactly the kind of place that could turn a routine sortie into a disappearing act. Inside the cockpit, the world narrowed to instruments, compass headings, and the rhythm of the engine. 2 crewmen shared the aircraft with him. Radioman ARM-2/C, John Del Delaney, and LTJG, William Ted White, who wasn't even supposed to be on Bush's plane as the regular gunner that day. White had asked to fly the mission, an intelligence-minded choice that would become heartbreakingly permanent. They flew out over open water and cloud layers, a long blue distance that made every mile feel borrowed. And then Chichi Jima appeared, dark land in a bright ocean, followed almost immediately by bursts of flak. Anti-aircraft fire doesn't come at you like a movie bullet. It appears around you, black puffs blooming in the air with brutal math, the sky suddenly full of wrong places to be. The Avengers pressed in anyway. Bush lined up the run. That's when his aircraft was hit. Somewhere in the chaos of concussion and vibration, the Avenger began to fail. Flames and damage spreading through a machine that, seconds ago, had been obedient and whole. The cockpit would have filled with alarms and instinct at once. Keep it steady. Keep the nose where it needs to be. Don't let the plane roll into a death spiral. Bush held it together long enough to do the one thing that made the whole flight mean something. He released his bombs. Only then did he abandon the airplane. He bailed out at low altitude. Accounts often place it around a few thousand feet. And in the violent transition from cockpit to open air, he struck his head on the tail of the aircraft. It was the kind of detail that sounds small until you imagine it. Wind screaming, parachute yanking your body upward, and then a sudden, blunt impact that can turn your thoughts to fog in an instant. He hit the water, cut himself free, and fought his way to a life raft. Overhead, another American plane circled, part guardian, part witness, marking the spot in a sea that could swallow a man without leaving a ripple behind. Bush looked for 2 parachutes. He didn't see them. Later, he told rescuers he believed his crew either bailed out over the island or went down with the plane. Delaney and White never returned. For a while, the war moved on without him. The raid continued. The aircraft carrier went about its business. The Pacific stayed enormous, and Bush drifted. A raft in that ocean is a strange kind of prison. No walls, nowhere to go. Salt stings your eyes. The sun cooks you. The horizon offers nothing but the promise that help might not come in time. He was injured, exhausted, and close enough to enemy territory that the wrong kind of boat could end his story. But the US Navy had a lifeline for downed pilots in that theater. Submarines assigned to lifeguard duty, prowling near contested islands to pick aviators out of the sea. One of those submarines was the USS Finback. At about 9:30 a.m., Finback received a report. A torpedo bomber had been shot down between islands near Chichi Jima. The sub's diesel engines roared to life, and she raced toward the coordinates, carefully. Shore batteries on the island could punish anything that surfaced too close, so Finback held a standoff distance of about 7.5 miles from shore. It took a little more than 2 hours just to reach the reported location. When they found him, it wasn't with trumpets or speeches. It was a periscope, steel gray water, and sailors trained to move fast. Bush was hauled aboard, soaked, rattled, alive, and treated for his injuries. Finback's captain immediately began a search pattern for the missing crewmen, hoping against the odds that Delaney and White had gotten out over the water. The search would have felt like a refusal to accept reality, even as reality pressed in from every side. That day, Finback would also execute another rescue under Japanese fire near nearby islands, an illustration of how perilous lifeguard duty really was. Surfacing in the wrong place could mean a submarine's end. Bush's survival already bordered on miraculous. But the darker truth, the part history attaches to this event like a shadow, was what might have happened if he drifted a little closer to land, or if an enemy patrol had found him first. Because Chichi Jima became the site of a horrific war crimes episode. Between August 1944 and March 1945, Japanese forces on the island executed 8 downed U.S. airmen, and post-war investigations established that 4 of those victims were cannibalized after execution. This wasn't rumor passed around a mess hall. It was investigated in the aftermath of the war, amid destroyed records, false stories, and reluctant witnesses, until testimony and trial records forced the truth into the open. Bush, floating in a raft that morning, didn't need to know those specifics to understand the basic danger. A downed aviator near an enemy-held island was not merely in trouble. He was in the kind of trouble people didn't come back from. He did. And that's what gives this story its cruel shape. The heroism sits right next to the loss. Bush lived, but his crew did not. The mission succeeded in the narrowest tactical sense. Bombs fell where they were meant to. But it cost 2 lives in one aircraft, and it belonged to a broader campaign that asked young men to spend their luck like currency. Years later, Bush would speak about the men he lost and the way that day stayed with him, less as a triumph than as a permanent weight. Even stripped of politics and legacy, the episode remains a pure distillation of the Pacific Air War, a flight off a carrier deck at dawn, a blackburst sky,
a burning airplane that still holds its line long enough to finish the job, a parachute snap, a hard, painful splashdown, and then, hours later, a submarine rising out of the sea like the only door left unlocked. A few miles in any direction, and the story ends differently.